Welcome back. And this stop and think was a true or false question, but it's a profit maximizing monopolist will price its output where demand is inelastic, true or false. And this is kind of a tricky one, but to get there, we need to remember what happens to total revenue at various elasticity regions. So when the price goes up and demand is elastic, total revenue goes down, again, because we're price sensitive. When demand is unit elastic and price goes up, total revenue is unchanged. And when demand is inelastic and price goes up, total revenue goes up. So, to answer that question, let's first think about what happens when marginal revenue is zero. And when marginal revenue is zero, we must know that the elasticity of demand is unit elastic, because marginal revenue is zero, therefore total revenue is unchanged. And from here, we can label the elasticity regions of the demand curve. Knowing that any firm, monopolists included, will always price where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, will always set that level of output, we can then take that point and push it up to the demand curve and see that a profit maximizing monopolist is pricing where output is elastic. So we have this monopolist who has some level of market power. They are a price maker, and we want to know why monopolies are problematic. And the word monopoly often has a negative connotation. We think about greed, we think about price gouging, but that's often not true monopoly. Having said that, monopolies can be problematic in an economic sense. And that's because they are producing at an inefficient level. So we have not maximized welfare. We have not maximized efficiency. And also, when there is a monopoly, because there is a limited amount of reasonable substitutes, there's less consumer choice. And finally, monopolists engage in rent-seeking behavior. And we're going to define rent-seeking behavior as monopolists attempting to secure rights through the political process. In other words, because monopolies afford you market power, you are incentivized to keep that power, and one such way to keep that power is by lobbying politicians. So let's explore this first problem, this problem of inefficiency, by again comparing these market structures, comparing competitive markets to monopolies. So, competitive market, supply to the sky, demand to the land. The efficient market output is where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. And since each firm is a price taker, they take the market prices as given and maximize profits where price equals marginal revenue equals marginal cost. No firms are an economic profit, and since there's free entry, firms are efficient in their production. Let's compare that to a monopolist. And remember, for an individual firm, the firm supply curve is the marginal cost curve above its average variable cost. So here, instead of a market supply to the sky, we have upward sloping supply from the monopolist's marginal cost curve. If this were a competitive market, we would see price at that competitive price and competitive quantity, but it's not. What this means is that the monopolist is pricing where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. The monopolist is lowering that level of output and setting the price higher than the competitive market. The monopolist is charging a higher price and producing less output than would occur under perfect competition. What does this mean? It means that there are welfare effects. Because the monopolist is charging a higher price and producing less output, then there's this difference between the competitive output and the monopolistic output. Society would be better off if there were those additional units produced. Since the monopolist is restricting output, there is deadweight loss. But there's another problem in that this surplus is transferred from the consumer, of which we are all one, to the monopolist. Now, some might not consider this a problem, but as consumers, we can all feel shorted by it. The real problem, or the main problem, I should say, is this deadweight loss. So to summarize, monopolists produce less output than in competitive markets. With less output, there's a higher price, in part because they are price makers. They can control the market price. And this reduced output means we are inefficient. There is deadweight loss under a monopoly. So let's close this mini lecture by talking about the other two problems we think about with monopolies: limited choice and rent seeking. Since a monopoly sells goods with no substitutes, consumers pay higher prices than if there were other choices available. There's no competition there. So think about your cable companies. So on TV, your cable company bundles channels that you don't want. I don't care about the Weather Channel, but I have to pay for it in order to get ESPN. It forces you to buy more to get what you want. Rent seeking, again, is the monopolist trying to maintain their market power. They are wasting time, effort, and resources to keep their monopoly in ways that could otherwise benefit the consumer. So when resources are used to secure monopoly rights through the political process. So rather than spending money on research and development, innovation, making the product better, or improving the process of production, they're spending their money defending the monopoly. And this is an inefficient use of resources. In other words, what are the social costs to this monopoly? Right? Rival firms are trying to compete to become a monopolist, and the monopolist is using those resources to fight these rival firms back rather than become a more competitive firm. So let's close out this mini lecture nugget by thinking about what is the social cost of this monopoly. And it's the deadweight loss plus the value of the resources used to rent seek, to fight back other competition.